All
Over
right.
to you, Bhakti.
Perfect. Thanks, Ankur. And hello, everyone. Hi, TOC. Great to see all of you back again. And as promised, we bring you a legend every month, a legend of outreach, a legend who's been around for long enough for us to draw so much from their experience. And today we are very, very proud to have Adrian with us. And he needs absolutely no introduction. But Adrian is the founder and executive chairman of Sannam Group. And Sannam is one of the pioneers of market entry for organizations across different segments and industries in the world, different companies, but education primarily. And they are at the forefront of market entry in education in India. And there is a lot to be said about the work that Sanam S4 has done, especially given that they have a very, very strong team in this part of the world. But we all know that it takes vision to drive something the scale forward and make it what it is today. So we are very thrilled to have Adrian with us to share his experiences, not just from the perspective of what's next and what's happening right now, but also a little bit of context of where he started, etc. Adrian, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you. Just very quickly, Adrian, for your context, the Outreach Collective is a collective of professionals. It's a non-profit organization that is founded by Ankur and I, and it's a collective of outreach professionals or anyone who's related to the field of career and college guidance. We have over 750 members in a short span of just 4 months, and these are members from they're from schools, they're school leaders, they're counselors. We have university representation through directors, deans, academics, and of course, outreach professionals. And then we have organizations like the College Board, the IB, and so many others that are a part of it, and service providers. The idea is we need to come together to collaborate and not function in silos if we want to see very, very significant changes in the way we all function. So, with that brief introduction about the Outreach Collective and the series of Legends of Outreach, which brings in legends like you for us to learn from, welcome once again. And Ankur, over to you so we can kickstart our conversation.
So thank you so much, Bhakti, for that introduction. I'm so excited to have Adrian with us. I'm in the entire TOC community is very excited. As I informed Adrian on email, I mean, previously we have hosted Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar, Vice Chancellor of OP General Global University on this forum. And then we hosted Vineet Gupta, the founder and trustee of Ashoka University and Plaksha University in the month of February. And when both me and Bhakti were thinking of inviting the third guest, and we were shortlisting people, and we were saying who should we invite, and I mean we had two fantastic Indians. I mean I'm calling Indians. I also read about Adrian. I went through one of his interviews where he says he proudly his children call himself proudly themselves Indians, and so I am assuming I mean that he is Indian at heart. And his family is. But we really wanted somebody from an outsider perspective who came to India and has contributed immensely to the growth of this country. And actually, he came in around 92 when I was just about under 10 years of age. That will give my age away. And that is where India underwent reforms, and there was a lot of liberalization with our finance minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and our honorable prime minister at that time, Narasimha Rao. And when I went through his history and little bit that I read about him, I said this person has gone through the entire liberalization scene in our country, and we just wanted him to be here badly. I knew he was a very busy guy, and I didn't know whether he would respond back or what will happen, but I am really grateful that Adrian took the time out and accepted our invitation. And the moment we released his name, there a lot of people reached out to me and said he was a guy that we wanted to know more about. But I don't know, is it that not many people in the community uh, had an opportunity to interact directly with Adrian? Maybe that's why it is so exciting for all of us to have you here and to hear your own story from your own self. So just a brief announcement to everybody. I know there are a lot of questions that everybody wants to ask, but Adrian has to leave 15 minutes early. So he will be leaving by India time 6:15. So just keep that in mind so that we don't block him with a lot of questions. So be brief in your questions, and I will kick off this session by asking the obvious. Adrian, what made you come to India and to Saharanpur of all places in 92? And what were you doing there? What's the reason behind you being in India in 92?
Well, firstly, thank you, Bhakti and Ankur, for having me. This is a great privilege and an honour to be part of the fabulous work that you are pioneering and to speak to so many peers in the industry. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I was a 14-year-old boy living in Oxford, and I was at school one day, and in my geography lesson, I was shown a video on the busties of Calcutta. And what struck me is how much entrepreneurialism, how much colour, how much vibrancy existed in that busty, and how it was just an absolute, for me, it was a kind of fascinating geography lesson. I still remember it as if it was yesterday, and that was, giving my age away, that was a long time ago, 1988. And I said to my teacher at the end of that lesson, I said, Mr. Fishpool, one day I'm going to go to India and I'm going to go and see that busty, and fulfilled that through the opportunity to go to Saharanpur. And of course, in 1992, I was a bright-eyed new adult, just turned 18. I'd left school in Oxford, and I wrote to all sorts of organisations requesting a job. And the only job offer I got was from Mr. Joshi, the headmaster of Saharanpur Public School. And of course, you couldn't Google anything. There was no reference material to it. And so I wrote to the Royal Society for Asian Affairs in London and said, can you tell me anything about Saharanpur? I've been offered a job there. And they said, well, of course. And they wrote back to me and they said, Adrian, Saharanpur is a fabulous place. It's at the foothills of the Himalayas. You have views of the snow-capped mountains. It has a river flowing through it, a beautiful wood market. It's a vibrant, industrial, prosperous town, a fabulous botanical garden, and the best mangoes in India. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity this is. I've got to go. So, dear Mr. Joshi, I accept your invitation to come and teach at your school, and packed my bags, got my visa and my malaria tablets, and off I went. And of course, I arrive, and it's somewhat different than the letter that I still had in my bag. I read it, and I said, okay, I can't see the Himalayas. I can't see the end of the road with the pollution. The river was a bubbling cesspit next to the school. I went to the botanical gardens, which did exist, but it was a bit like being Indiana Jones. You scraped off the moss. The gates, the lock had rusted and hadn't been opened for 30 or 40 years, if not more. The wood market's still there. It still produces fine carvings for local and international export. And I wrote back to the Royal Society. I said, look, where did you get this information? The Himalayas have moved 500 miles. I have to go all the way up to Chandigarh to see them. The botanical gardens is closed and the lock's rusted. The river's a bubbling cesspit. The wood market's decrepit. I said, but the mangoes here are delicious. And so that was my kind of introduction. Within 6 weeks of arriving, I got malaria. So I got first-hand insight into the Indian third-tier healthcare system, which was quite fascinating. And I decided that's not a good place to recuperate. So I went back to my hostel room. I lived in a hostel in the school, and I had my luxuries were a big bucket, a small bucket, a hole in the ground, which of course as a Westerner, you're not quite sure which way to stand or what to do with it. And a bar of Lux soap. That for me was just the most wonderful thing. I kind of used that right down to the last slither. And I was earning 400 rupees a month. And so my weekly treat was a thumbs up masala from the local Kirana store. That was the kind of height of luxury for me. And I got what was then a newly installed water cooler. And many people, think of air conditioning units these days. And I was having a conversation with someone the other day where he said, "Oh yes, when I grew up, I had an air conditioning unit." And I said, "Did you have an air conditioning unit or a water cooler?" Because they're different things, with the hay that sits in and the big propeller, and you have to keep refilling the water. And my staff in India couldn't understand why I kept asking them to deliver me ice, because I figured if you put the ice in the bottom of the water cooler, it'd actually blow through cooler air, but there wasn't enough power to produce the ice. So basically, I just arrived in the middle of summer of 1992, exceptionally hot. I had to become instantly a local Indian, because there were no Western comforts. There's no familiarity with Oxford whatsoever. This was just a wholly new experience. And then in the December, of course, you had the Ayodhya temple disturbance, which caused enormous trouble. And so from the window of my hostel, I got firsthand experience of the horrors of communal violence, and was essentially deemed, after that Saharanpur was put on 24/7 curfew. We were in curfew for 4 or 5 days. The school was starting to be attacked because we had some Muslim staff inside the canteen. And so we were like a fortress. And, here I am, 3 months out of the idyllic surroundings of Oxford, having rocks thrown at my window by people, angry mobs trying to get into lynch our kitchen workers. So it was deemed that it wasn't safe for me to be there. So I was taken out under the kind of cover of this, driven out in this ambassador car, traditional ambassador car, taken to the station to get out of the city. Because of the curfew, the train station was absolutely packed. You could not move on the train station because no one could leave the station. The police were preventing anyone leaving. So I finally got on this train, which was bound for Delhi and onto then Goa, which was safe at the time. And as we were leaving the station, we had people throwing rocks at the train, people with sticks banging the train. It was a wholly frightening experience. And after we kind of finally got out a little bit into some of the calmer agricultural lands, I went to reach for my money belt to buy myself a cup of chai, and realized that actually my money belt had gone, which had all my money. It had my passport. It had the one credit card that I had at the time. So in my pocket, I had 21 rupees, a packet of Ponchoic BDs, the original pink coloured BDs, a box of matches, and that was it. And I was going to be on the train for 2.5 days. So what was supposed to be this idyllic posting at the foothills of the Himalayas turned out to be somewhat of an educational experience. So that was my first experience of India, and I would like to feel that that's set me up with a very good foundation of understanding the country, warts and all.
So I mean, and we all have. I mean, I have seen the story of how you switched back on the train to reach Goa. I mean, if you can just briefly talk about that also to the wider audience here, and what was that incident?
So of course I realized that I'm now stuck on this train for 2.5 days. I have 21 rupees, which is not going to last very long. And everyone's very frightened. The train is packed. People are leaving the north, trying to get to safety in the south. And I had to figure a way of basically providing some income for myself for when I got to Goa. And so I took the chaiwala's teapot from him, took his Nehru cap, put it on my head. And in the old days, they had the clay cups, not these modern day paper recyclable cups. And I walked up and down the train singing Jai, Jai, Garam Jai. And remember, people on the train are fearing for their lives. And then there's this white-faced, long blonde-haired 18-year-old selling them. And they're looking at me, is this an albino? Is this, what is this guy actually doing? And of course, firstly, it's just seeing my white face, white skin. Secondly, it's hearing me speak Hindi. And then, you could see the look on people's eyes. Yeah, they wanted a cup of tea, but they didn't know what to say. So gradually people would say, do cup de do. So I'd pour out 2 cups and here you go. And they'd give me 4 rupees. I say, no, 10 rupee hai. I say, kya hua? Bahut manga hai. I said, no, ye bahut acha angrezi chai hai. Oh, okay. And so they'd give me 10 rupees. So I made a 3 rupee margin on a 2 rupee cup of chai. And over the next 2.5 days, I sold everything from cutlet, gram cutlet, ketchup, Uncle Chips, dunda fruity, and just went up and down the train selling my wares for 2.5 days. So by the time I got to go, I had enough money to at least survive for a few days until my traveller's checks finally reappeared.
I mean, we just take a moment to realize this, that you were doing that.
Yeah, but I mean, the business acumen is clear that it
Yeah.
was there from very early ages. And, speaking of acumen, that's a good segue into Sannam S4. But Ankur, would you like to say something before we segue to
Just to
acumen?
close this
Yeah,
Saharanpur chapter for
yeah.
Adrian. So you were working as a teacher in the school there in Saharanpur?
Exactly, yeah. So I was teaching English and economics, and the school didn't really understand the difference between A levels, my address living in Oxford and Oxford University. So there was this grand ceremony where I was introduced to all of the parents, where they introduced me as a professor from Oxford University who had 3 first-class degrees in English, economics, and geography, which of course, what I'd actually done is A levels in a school in Oxford, and I think I got a B and 2 C's. So I didn't even get an A or equivalent to a first. And so all of a sudden I was held up as this, this Oxford Don who had arrived in Saharanpur to teach their 6-year-old children English. So, great selling point. I think I was up on billboards in Saharanpur as, the fact that this was the first iteration of the NEP 1992. We're bringing foreign collaboration in. So, I felt a little bit disingenuous, but did my best to encourage better English. I taught some economics and some geography to some of the students, but threw most of my energy into playing part of the cricket team, the school cricket team, which of course was where I could actually lend some real expertise. So it was quite an adventure.
What a story. I don't know if you're thinking of making a Bollywood movie someday on your story. I mean, this looks like a Bollywood plot.
It
I
sounds
mean,
like
you
stories,
coming.
doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it has all the masala. I mean, it has all the ingredients for we can go on in the story for another 1 hour easily. I mean, it's like amazing experiences this guy would have had in 92.
So
but
that's a great point. Last night I was out with Amish Tripathi, who's a good friend of mine. You'll know him from the Ramchandra series. And last night he was launching his new book, War of Lanka, in London. And so I was very kindly invited by him to join him. And he is talking to me about turning the story into a book, into a mini series, into a documentary. So hold that thought, Anchor. Maybe with Amish's help,
I'm sure it will be out soon. We can't. I mean, it has all the ingredients. I mean, I will be the first one to go and watch it. Yeah.
That's splendid. Thanks.
So, Bhakti, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, like Ankur said, I was mesmerized when you were sharing your experience because you're a great storyteller, by the way. So I mean, it was really fun to hear you relay your experience. And yeah, I mean, I was surprised when you said the letter described Saharanpur as the base of the Himalayas, and I was like, do I live in the same country? Am I missing something here and there?
Well, back to you, of course, what happened during the pandemic is when all the pollution subsided in the Times of India, there was an article about how you could see the snow-capped mountains from Saharanpur. And about 150 people sent me that, including the foreign secretary, said, you were right. You see that what, because he'd heard the story before Harsh Ring. So you were right, and so must have been over 100 people sent me that article and said it was actually correct. You were just there at the wrong time.
At the wrong time, absolutely. And Adrian, what a I mean, I think every time we read about you or we see you meet with key figures in India, it's very heartening to see that there is some movement, there's significant movement happening in the space of education, because we don't see Indian government officials, ministers meeting with too many education leaders so openly and having such conversations, and I think you're at the forefront of that, and if they do, well, we don't know about it because it's not really written about, because other industries definitely get a lot more media time than education does. So it's very heartening to see the amount of work that you're doing, especially the government of UP. And I really want you to take us through your thought behind Sanam, and of course more specifically acumen, that and how did you identify the gaps, and very early on, because you've been Sanam has been around for a while. It's not a fad. You guys were at the forefront of it before people even realized that there was something called market entry, and that India was a destination to be recruited from, especially for higher ed. So tell us a little bit about your journey with Sanam. How did you set it up, and how did you think of education as a vertical?
Yeah, so in 2006, I went back to Saharanpur after a long time. And bear in mind, the city that I had left, I'd been dropped off in an ambassador car. Can you still hear me okay? Yeah. The headmaster had dropped me off in an ambassador car. I had I was used to a family that was strictly vegetarian. There was absolutely no commercialization, except I was in the room with the family, the extended family, and friends for the first night that Star TV went live, when there was the first kind of satellite channels. And I remember the family turning on MTV for the first time, and there were a number of scantily clad foreigners dancing on the TV, and then it got turned off immediately. It spent all this money on opening themselves up to satellite TV, and realized that it's a kind of a dangerous thing. But for me, in 2006, when I went back and I was picked up by the Sudhir Joshi, this time he arrived in a brand new Toyota Innova with all these kind of dazzly lights inside. He was wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses. He had a pair of Armani jeans on, and he had a BlackBerry. And I said to him, Sudhir, Kiowa, how on earth have you gone from this last picture of you dropping me off in your ambassador in the middle of kind of rioting India to now being in Western clothes, BlackBerry phone, telling me about his investments in the Nasdaq and bakeries that he'd bought in Chandigarh? And it was in that conversation that I realized I wanted to come back and be a prominent part of India's future. And so 2 years later, in 2008, I came back to set Sannam S4 up. So we're just having our 15th year birthday celebrations next month in April. And the original premise was recognizing that India was at the beginning of much transformation, and governments have come and gone since then, of course, but the writing was on the wall. And when I saw firsthand in what was then a third tier city, what I'd been reading about in The Economist from London, I recognized that this was real. This wasn't just hyperbole that was in the international media, and I wanted to be part of it. And so I moved in April. My wife was pregnant when we moved. We decided that we were going to have our children born in India, and I'm still lobbying to MEA to have them some kind of citizenship rights, which maybe will be a lifetime campaign, but we'll get there. And I set the business up to provide honest, trusted, good quality advice and the practical support that any organization would need to come into the country. And we're, particularly to this audience, we're very commonly known for our education credentials. We do have an absolutely fantastic university partner portfolio that, frankly, I think the best in the sector. But we have another very large part of our business that helps Fortune 50 companies, that helps some of the world's best known brands in technology, in aerospace, in retail, we manage the local support for many of the world's leading non-profit organizations, Gates Foundation, World Bank, IFC, Malaria No More, American Heart Association. So we're doing a whole bunch of work outside of the education sector as well. We bring in $1 billion a year of investment into India every year, at least $1 billion. And we're creating hundreds, actually thousands of jobs through the corporate clients that are coming in, setting up factories, setting up back offices, delivering world-class healthcare programs. So there's a whole other world within the Sannam S4 constellation that people don't really understand. And that's really why we then undertook this rebranding exercise, is because no one was seeing this work and it just wasn't visible enough. And so last year we took the decision to create separate divisions within the business so that people could see the education portfolio as it is under the Acumen brand. And what is now called Seamless is everything we do in the kind of corporate and non-profit space. But when you combine the two, there's an enormous contribution that I'd like to think we're making to the India story. And we're very fortunate that we get the access to very senior people in government. I was with the Indian High Commissioner to the UK, Vikram Doraiswamy, last night, talking to him about some issues that are in this sector, the education. But I'm also then talking to Piyush Goyal about a commerce issue that one of our big corporate clients has got. So, for me, I feel so privileged doing my job. This, for me, I get paid to do something that I absolutely love, and it's multi-sector. But of course, the education part of the story is the most prominent.
Thanks, Adrian. I mean, I think, and for us at least, this community, Sannam is for is education, because that's what we follow. But yes, absolutely, I think the work that you're doing in other segments, it is what adds to the Sannam S4 story and the scale that you've achieved. And I think all the lessons from different segments feed into each other. And what is interesting and also very heartening is that education is another vertical like FMCG or like any other vertical. It's not it. I mean, you've treated it with a lot of professional respect and brought in that structure which we otherwise see missing in a lot of companies or sort of verticals that you associate with education. So I think Sannam S4 definitely can be credited, and you can definitely be credited with the fact that the immense corporate structure that we see at Sannam is something that is now being replicated, which is great. It's really something to learn from Sannam, and that brings me to the fact that it's a very complex structure, and it's evolved over a period of time because you do have a lot of clients. You represent all kinds of universities, and if I may take the liberty of saying, you have a huge UK clientele. That's your forte. Over the last decade or so, if you could, I know it's a long journey to sum up, but if you could kind of sum up the evolution of your lessons, your key lessons over a period of this decade, and what is it right now? What is the mantra for your education vertical?
Yeah, look, firstly, when I arrived in India in very quick succession, I had 3 children born in Delhi, 2 in Max Saket and 1 in Fortis La Femme. And at that point, I recognized that I was building a story for not just me, but for my children who were born in India, and I hoped would then, go on to be as interested in India as I am and contribute what they could to the India story. And so I've just celebrated my 30 years association with India, but for me, that's halfway through the journey. I feel like it's kind of half time in a soccer match. Have my oranges, sit down with the MEA, and in that discussion that Anka was referring to, which maybe we can post a link to at the end of the session, Anka, for people to go and have a look at the video. That for me was a kind of half-time reflection of my contribution to India. This is a 60-year project for me, starting at the age of 18. And if I live to 100, it will be more than 60 years. So let's see. So the one thing that I set out to do from day one is to not sacrifice quality and trust for anything. Now, we've seen some companies grow exponentially. We've seen some crazy valuations, particularly in the edtech recruitment sector. We've seen offices built and scaled with thousands of people. But those companies are coming to us at the moment for help right now. Okay, we've scaled, but we haven't got the quality. How can we kind of bring that quality to the sector? How can we bring that governance? How can we build those disciplines? And I could be long gone on a yacht somewhere in the south of France if we'd have sacrificed the type of client that we wanted to take on, the type of project we wanted to take on, and scaled much bigger. We've been self-funded, we're privately owned. I'm the largest shareholder. We don't have VC money, we don't have external investment. We've resisted all that because we want to run the business the way that we want to run it. And for me, India is my home. It's where my children were born, and I don't want to mess up in my own backyard. And so, so that long-term aspiration, I think, has driven a certain patience that you need to build quality. It takes time to build a quality organization. It takes time to build a reputation. You can build headlines, you can build marketing campaigns, you can build, kind of valuations, but ultimately 15 years later, do they still stack up? And what we have to work on every single day, and it's harder and harder and harder as you get bigger, is maintaining that position in the industry where you're still the trusted go-to partner and people still have that respect for you. It's just harder at scale. And I was very fortunate many years ago, must have been 2009, 2010, just when I'd set up Sannam S4. I met Ratan Tata and I had a conversation with him exactly about this. And I said, Adrian, how do you build an organization like Tata that just has that inherent quality and the standards and governance? And he said to me, Adrian, it's just time, hard work, and patience. There are no shortcuts to this. And he said, it's going to take you 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And that's what it's going to take. And that rung true with me very early on. And when you're given advice by, Sri Tataji, you take it on board, and it stays at the forefront of your mind forever.
Ankur, yours. I know you have so many questions.
So I have a lot of questions. I mean, I'll try and come to the most relevant ones to the conversation that we are just having right now. Adrian, I mean, you are very well connected, and we see you with all the right people. I mean, all the big people. But I'm sure it was not always like this, right? I mean, when you started out setting up your business in India, I mean, it not have been easy. I'm making an assumption, and you being an outsider and coming to the country and thinking of setting a business. I mean, I'll speak on behalf of TOC and Bhakti. I mean, when we decided to set up TOC and in 2023, still we face a lot of bureaucracy. And so, how was it like for you? I mean, how did it sound for you? Can you share a bit of something about that?
Well, very briefly on the business side,
Yeah.
setting up a business and running a business in India now is somewhat different to my first company, which I set up in 1993. It took me 2 years to get my phone line approved, and now you can go in and buy a cell phone with 5G instantly. So from a business side, it's got easier, but it's still hard work. It's navigating the landscape, keeping on top of everything you need to. But that's just a global issue.
Okay.
I think just on building the business, my two biggest expenses have been new shoes and business cards, because I've walked up and down conference halls, I've walked around networking environments, and I've been handing out business cards forever and telling my story. And being very frank with you, it's only the last 3 or 4 years that I felt like it's gone from a shift of me going and introducing myself to people and having to burn through those leather soles of mine, to actually now people coming to me in the room and saying, Mr. Mutton, can we talk to you? We're really interested in the work you're doing. And that's at all levels. And I still find that quite remarkable. I was talking to Amish Tripathi about this, who's gone from being a kind of business person to this global celebrity in with his books and now his media work and so on. And there is an inflection point, which if you just keep doing the right things well, consistently, finally it pays off. And that for me has only been in the last few years. And what I'm trying to do now is leverage that inflection point and sit down with Honourable Minister Yogi, with Honourable Minister Pradhan, with the PMO, with key stakeholders, and saying, look, how can I contribute more to the India story? What can I bring that helps what you're trying to do? On one hand, and on the other hand, have you thought about this? So we're working on a really exciting project with the PMO at the moment on digitization of the Indian higher education system, and that's entirely pro bono. I give my time to that. I give my team's resources to it. And when you've got open and regular dialogue with the Prime Minister's office on projects like that, you just feel like it's all worthwhile. And for me, it's never been about the money, the valuations, the publicity. It's just being welcomed. And last night when I was at Amish's event and I was introduced to a very senior member of the BJP, and Amish Tripathi introduced me and said, this is Adrian Mutton. He introduced me in Hindi and he said, he's one of us. He looks foreign, he looks British, but he's actually Indian. And that for me is the utmost respect, and I felt very good about that. If Amish had said, here's a guy that runs a business that's doing X number of millions of pounds of revenue and employs hundreds of staff, that would have been the second or third or fourth thing that I would have been interested in being introduced for. But to be introduced as one of them, i.e. someone who's very senior in the BJP and Amish Tripathi, you can imagine I'm thinking, oh my God, my heart was gushing. I thought I finally got there. So it's been bloody hard work, but as I said to you, it's just time, patience and consistent delivery of a quality service.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful advice that I also agree totally with. Anything that you want to do at top level requires continuous efforts, persistence, hard work, and just keep your head down. And keep giving your business cards everywhere you go. And then there is an inflection point. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful piece of advice for all the young entrepreneurs here that are listening into you. So quickly, we have a lot of audience questions also, but before I enter those, I want to also talk about since we are an education community and we have people largely from higher education sector who are represented here. We have spoken about the new education policy that came in 2020, and now recent announcements of setting up of Australian university campuses in India. So there are a lot of interesting and positive things that are happening in India with regards to education also. We are all excited with the speed of development that is happening. So what are your thoughts on it, Adrian? How are you seeing the new education policy, the new foreign universities bill? You spoke about digitization of education along with the PMO, the work that you are doing. So if you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, so there's only one thing that really keeps me up at night, and it's not my P&L at work. It's not World War III. It's not the crisis in Ukraine, sad though that it is. It's India not living up to its full potential. That's the thing that makes me anxious. And I feel like I've got to do everything I possibly can to contribute to the country doing everything it can do to fulfill its potential, not just do more, but reach its potential, because there's a difference between just doing more and actually fulfilling your potential. And that's my focus. And in the higher education landscape, the first thing I think India's got to achieve is it's got to open access. It's got to provide more access to educate more people to a greater standard and equip them with the skills that are relevant. And it's got to do that in an affordable way. You can't keep creating debt to fund education. You know, that's just not sustainable longer term. And so my work with the PMO is primarily centered around those first components, which is let's open access, let's get the quality right, let's get the type of education right, and let's make it affordable. And let's see what we can. The Prime Minister's fully driving this. It's like, look, this is what I want to do. I want it to be my manifesto next year. We want to be the country that leads the way on quality, open access, and affordability of higher education. And so there's a lot of thought going into that. And where India will not live up to its potential is where it doesn't provide economic opportunities for the enormous amounts of young people that come out of school or university. When almost 1 in 4 people on planet Earth, that's an entire planet, the only living planet that we know of in the entire solar system, 1 in 4 of those people under the age of 25 live in India. So that's a quarter of humankind out of 220 odd countries, right? So the world should be focused on making sure that quarter of the world's population under 25 is properly educated. Otherwise, you're going to make the Arab Spring look like a tea party at the Taj Mansingh Hotel, right? You've got a much bigger problem to be dealing with. And so that is critical, you know, everything from climate change to border conflict to natural disasters. We've got to get all of that cohort of the world society adequately trained and educated. The other big thing, and I was very fortunate to walk the floor with Amitabh Kant and Prime Minister Modi when they opened the Make in India campaign in Mumbai. Lost track of time, but however many years ago that was. And I remember saying at the time that this is a fantastic initiative, but it's not enough. India has to start owning its own intellectual property. Otherwise, you just become a cost plus nation. And as soon as Africa gets itself sorted, you've got big competition coming. India has the advantage of the fact that it's got very, very, very smart people and lots of them. It's got the advantage of being able to communicate in English to a great degree across the country, which opens up many, many conversations. And it's trusted by the world, which is a big thing, because look at what's happening in China at the moment. So aligned with the Make in India campaign, I continue to advocate for a much stronger focus on R&D in India and making sure that the next 6G or 7G technology is developed by Indians in India, and the licensing of that technology around the world, the money and the value comes back to India. It's not held in Silicon Valley, or it's not held in London, or it's not held in Beijing. And just last week, I met Charlie Yidan, who's one of the founders of Tencent, $448 billion technology company. And you realize how China's created wealth, not out of outsourcing the back office development work or the back office call centers, but it's created wealth because it owns the intellectual property of its technology. Okay, how it got it, we won't discuss in this forum, but it's developed it and it's commercializing it. And most of the 5G technology, even India, 70% of India's technology infrastructure is Chinese. 70%. Right? That's not good.
That is a, yeah, That is a big number.
So our role collectively is to make sure that we're educating people in a way that they're able to go and be entrepreneurial, they'll be innovative, and we keep them in the country, and that IP is developed in the country, it's business friendly, and people can then create the wealth, not just the jobs, not just the cost plus model, but create the wealth in India that then gets distributed more evenly across the country.
Absolutely, Adrian. And I agree with you. I mean, until unless we build our own intellectual property and we own that property, we own our own technology, we cannot live up to the aspirations of the large population, the large young population that we have in the country. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if Africa gets its bearings right in coming few years, then India has a tough competition because being here in Africa, I can also already see some good initiatives happening. I mean, Kenya, but seeing really good momentum here also. And I also think about this sometimes that, if Africa picks up, it's also a Anglophone country. I mean, a lot of them are Anglophone and then Francophone Africa. So there is immense potential here as well. So India has to build its own capacity and it is required. So absolutely bang on. I would really want to enter because I'm conscious of the time. I'm also going to enter the Q&A session from the audience. May I request all those who we informed that you can ask your questions to Adrian first can come on the screen. I see Harish on the screen right now. So I'll go over to Harish first. Harish from the College Board. Harish, if you can take your question up with Adrian.
Thanks, Ankur. Hi, Adrian. It's a privilege and honor to hear from you today. So a few years ago, I was part of the College Board founding team to bring its mission-based work to India. We set up our infrastructure, legal entity, procedures, contracts, templates, etc. And it was not easy. During implementation, we soon realized that standardized processes does not always work in a diverse country like India. Also, there are some cultural practices that are part of the day-to-day work that many in the West are not so accustomed to. My favorite example is the concept of jugaad and how it is very different for an affluent person versus a low-income person in India. Many in the West just cannot wrap their heads around this concept. So I guess in your wise counsel to foreign companies who want to set up shop in India, what are some of these business work practices in India, if any, that surprise them or for whom it's a steep learning curve?
That's a good question. I think I come back to Ratan Tataji's words. That a lot of companies see India as a get-rich-quick opportunity. They say, look, we want to capture 1% of the market, and their business plans are predicated on that. But the companies that have done well in India they've either got good experience behind them or they've leapfrogged an existing opportunity. Maybe that's with Ola, for example, or it's with Oyo, or it's one of these other tech companies who's kind of come into a space. I think the one thing that lets foreign companies down when they come into India is just not being patient enough and just not recognizing that they need to just lay foundation after foundation after foundation. I've got a large UK company that I'm helping navigate into the market, and their CEO said to me last week, look, Adrian, if we can't make this business profitable in day one, we're not coming to India. And I said to him, well, Andy, my suggestion is don't come to India then, because you've got to invest, you've got to build a team, you've got to take time to understand the market. You've got to be in this for the long term. And it's quite interesting. I personally get involved in projects where venture capital backed foreign companies are coming into India because it's the next story to tell the next investor. It's not their story. It's like, look, we're just about to go into India and we're going to have 30% of 1.6 billion audience, and we're going to be the next Reliance Geo. And I have to be as genuine as possible to these folk and tell them that, look, maybe what they're presenting to their investors is a little bit over ambitious, but It's your presentation. You do what you want to do. But people are now aligning themselves with the India story because they've been caught cold in China, or because they realized that the domestic market of Europe, for example, the economies are just flatlining. And so there's a perception of what India is going to do for you as a corporate, and then there's the reality. And I'm still trying to figure India out 30 years on. People introduce me, say, Adrian's an India expert. I say no, because I haven't been to India for 7 days, so I'm out of touch. I may be an expert at the end of any given day, but tomorrow something else changes, and I'm not. And so, it's a big country for which there are many different countries within it. For everything that is true, there is a corresponding statement that is equally untrue. And it takes a while for foreigners to get used to that, because the headline numbers on the first slide that you present look so appealing. You think, great, if I'm just 10% successful, I'm going to do really well. But as you all know from setting the college board up, being 10% successful is, that's hard. That's hard.
Tall task. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I agree with Adrian. I mean, I have seen that myself because I also travel a bit outside of India, and when people get excited by just seeing our population demographics, and they're like, okay, this even if I get 1% or 10% or whatever that number will be, but yeah, I mean, it's not that you go there and get that money out the next quarter that you have invested it in. So fabulous advice, Adrian. May I request Luca from the Ambassador platform to go ahead with this question?
Hi, Adrian. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hope you're well. Thanks for sharing your India story. That was absolutely fantastic and brilliant. I'm going to ask you, Adrian, to look through the crystal ball for me, maybe 5-10 years from now. There's two, in fact, more trends happening, but really there's a huge outbound student market with hundreds of thousands, millions of Indian students going out to study abroad. And there's also Indian institutions internationalizing, recruiting international students. There's also the best Indian, normally private, but sometimes public institutions trying to retain the best talent within India as well. So how do you see all these trends play out in the next 5 to 10 years? And maybe, Adrian, tell us what Indian institutions can learn from the Western institutions in terms of building those capabilities that Ankur was referring to. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, Luca. Thank you, and thanks for joining. It's a it's a well-used saying amongst us Indians that India often happens despite itself, right? It just kind of jugaad gets us there, as Hari said. It just keeps going. The story keeps going, and it's a bit like being the captain of a ship. Modi is in this giant 18th century ship with a flotilla of boats behind him, and lucky for him, he's got the wind in the sails at the moment, but he's crashing through the waves. Plates are flying across the table. Try and sit down and have a cup of chai, and the chai flies off, across the room. So, India is just this one juggernaut of a story that no one individual can claim credit for. It's 1.6 billion people getting up and working bloody hard every day to contribute to it. And on the education side of things, Luca, there is until the NEP came along, there wasn't a clearly articulated strategy for what India wanted to do vis-a-vis international higher education. Everything you're seeing at the moment is domestic focused, even with an international partnership agenda, but there still is no clear strategy on outbound student migration. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Are we happy with students being loaded with debt? Are we happy with those students going off and getting jobs? And it depends who you talk to. And I've sat with Mohan Bhagwatji at the RSS and talked about his views on this. I've talked to Minister Pradhan, I've talked to PMO, talked to all of these different folk. And they've all got a slightly different viewpoint to it. Some people say, great, this is another 1 million jobs a year we don't need to find, because these folk are going overseas and then they get jobs overseas and then they send the foreign dollars back, and that's a really big part of the country's economic story. Some of them now at MEA particularly are saying this is wonderful part of the soft power agenda. This is India on the global stage. You know, we're bringing these Indians to the fore. They're part of our story. Some people say this is brain drain. We're losing the brightest talent. Some people say they're being educated and coming back with new methods, new ideas, and that's increasingly the case, I'm glad to say. So there's a kind of whole mixture of things going on in the outbound student mobility, but there's not a strategy there. There's not a clear strategy. On the inbound side, you've got EdSil, who are running the Study in India campaign, and I had a call 2 weeks ago with Chandrasekhar, who's running EdSil these days. I said, what's your strategy? Is your strategy to provide average or low quality higher education to wider South Asians and Africans? Is that your strategy? If it is, fine, but then don't pretend to be attracting students from the West, because that's not a value proposition they're going to buy into. And what's the value of that low cost strategy? Because that's where you're playing at the moment. Those people that are doing study in India are people who are getting a marginally better education than they can in Bangladesh or Nepal or Africa somewhere. What's the value to India for that? They're paying marginally more than Indians who can't already get into their own university because the demand for the good ones is already so tight. There's not enough margin in it to say it's contributing to the economy. And unlike other foreign higher education strategies, there's no immigration play because they get no opportunity to stay in the country and work. They get kicked out the day they finish their final exam. So there's a kind of, the strategy is flawed as far as I'm concerned. And so that needs to be worked on. So NEP is an enormous step in the right direction, gives everyone a guiding light to work towards, but there is still much work to do. But anytime I say that, there's a tinge of disappointment and frustration, but it's overwhelmingly exciting that we've all got so much to do. None of us are going to get bored in the next 30 years doing the work that we do, because we've just got stuff to fix.
Absolutely. And Adrian is bang on. I mean, in terms of what he said, I mean, Study in India campaign, I also feel it requires a rethink in what we want to do and how do we want to position Indian education abroad. I mean, it's just, having traveled and recruited students for universities such as Ashoka and Jindal in my previous roles and international students, I mean, I also feel that we need to rethink on those lines. Quickly, I have a couple of more questions from the audiences that have been pre-sent in to us. Charushila, are you here, or should I read your question? I can see you are on the call. Okay.
Oh, definitely, I'm
Okay.
here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. But you know what? I have lost out on the question that I had written out. So please do go ahead and ask. And I have been so mesmerized with this conversation. Adrian, thank you so much for being such a storyteller. I think we all need that in higher ed. And so I've just thoroughly enjoyed it. I think my question would have been already answered as well. But go ahead, Ankur, go ahead and ask.
So I'll do this. I'll read out your question. You had mentioned, are you going to stay with the university pathway model, or will you be venturing into the agent route to college recruitments? In this cluttered education landscape, how should universities maintain relevance to schools and families? Is it about the personality approach of the university representative or the opportunity support from Sannam S4 that makes student recruitments possible? So that was your question.
I do want to qualify that question a bit because I'm friends with a number of people at Sannam S4, and Lakshmi continues to be my dearest of friend. And so over these years, you have seen, university representatives who have a certain dynamism around them. They're able to, of course, attract the right kind of students and the right kind of schools and the right kind of audience towards that university. It doesn't always happen with all kinds of university representatives. So there is a question there in terms of, how does Sannam go about strategizing and selecting the right kind of people for the right kind of universities. And then, of course, this basic question around agent versus an unbiased facilitation. Of course, a lot of counselors sitting in this room, I know, including myself, are completely skewed towards unbiased facilitation, and we feel that that should be the way forward. I'm a mother myself, and I feel there's no other way to look at higher ed. So, Adrian, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Really, really good questions, and thanks for following us. I probably would have been a lot wealthier, and the company would have been a lot bigger if we'd have taken the agent route 5 to 10 years ago. But as I said at the beginning of the conversation, that was not where I wanted us to play. Not that I have anything against the agents channel, because I'll come on to talk about what we are doing there, but because I feel that there's an enormous number of people already doing great work in the agent space. There are not many people like us doing what we're doing, and so I do feel like we're carving ourselves out a little bit of a unique space. So the answer is no. We're not going to become an agent, but what we are doing much more deliberately, and you will see going forward, is we are going to leverage what I think is an absolutely unique consortia of universities. 7 of the group of 8 from Australia, 2/3 of the Russell Group, 3 of the top 5 of Canada, some of the best universities in the United States, and everyone else who's not mentioned in that ranking portfolio who's with us is with us because they are genuinely committed to doing the right things in India. We have no universities who are taking shortcuts. No one comes to us and said, it's only volume. We don't care about quality. We don't care about who these students are. Just put them on a plane and send them to Canada or send them to the UK. That's just not the client portfolio that we have. And that's very, very important to us. So you will see coming into the spring, you will see more of a deliberate effort for us to bring our consortia to the fore, to agents. So we'll go to agents and we'll say, look, here's 75 really, really good universities from across the world. We'll be going to high schools. Do you want access to 75 universities from a range of different countries with a range of different propositions for your students? Because what Ashok Tripathi may want is different to what Sangeeta Reddy wants, right? So, we can give you that variety. You will see us leveraging that consortia to greater effect at government level. We're talking to government in India about skills. What skills do you really need? What does Ratan Tata need for his organization? What skills does the company need? How can we make sure that our universities are sending back Indian students with those skill sets? And so whilst we've allowed individual universities to go and do their thing, and we've supported their strategy and developed it, we feel there's much more impact we can make as a collective. And so that will be a shift. We will be sitting down and are already sitting down with agents proactively as Acumen. We've never done that before. We've allowed the individual representatives to sit down and have conversations. We're reaching out to the CEOs and managing directors and owners of agents across the country. So come and talk to us. How can we help? How can we work together? I'm getting feedback that your yield is too low. You're getting too many rejections. Why is that? Can we help? Can we build some resilience into your visa reviews or your documentation reviews? Because it's in no one's interests on this phone call if a nation or nations swing the pendulum the other way and say, oh my goodness, we've got uncontrolled immigration. We've got all of these students who are coming without the right documentation. They're not staying at the universities. Just a few bad eggs can spoil a whole big bunch. And that makes all of us have to work damn sight harder than we would otherwise do. So we're extending an arm out into the agents network in a way that we haven't done before. Not to compete, but to collaborate with the agents network. And for any of you that know us and want to work with us and want to reach out and partner with us, write to me directly, write to colleagues of ours that you already know. This is very much work in progress, but by the time we get to the spring, we'll be much more formal, we'll be much more resourced, and we hope collectively that we can continue to do the right things. As long as we know you're like-minded, as long as we know you're trying to do the right things, that you've got quality, governance, and an aspiration to be the best at what you do, you'll find us a very willing partner.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Charu. I'm also conscious of the time. We have just about under 10 minutes to go. So I'll go to Minakshi from the College Board. If you can take a question. Before you do that, if there is anybody else in the audience who wants to have a question answered by Adrian, please use raise hand option and we can give you a slot. Over to you, Minakshi.
Thank you, Ankur. Hi, Adrian. It is such a pleasure listening to your amazing story. And the Chaiwala story was already ahead, but today I think you've made the Saharanpur mangoes ahead as well. So, but yeah, it was lovely listening to you. My question is very simple, but I think it's being taken in part by Bhakti as well. So I'll tweak my question a bit. I wanted to ask, what is your best work memory so far that we could use as a learning? And if you could focus it for talent management, that would be great.
Yeah, look, as a boss of people, you very rarely feel like you're doing the right thing. You know, everyone gives you a hard time in their annual reviews. They're never satisfied that you've given them a good enough rating. Their faces of disappointment because they didn't get 10 out of 10 and a 30% pay rise are just heartbreaking. And I've never quite cracked that conundrum. But I'll just give you a recent example. It happens, I guess, more frequently now. I think Ankur mentioned that he was 10 when I first came into India. Our average age of workforce in Sannam S4 is 27. So I've been in India longer than the average of most of our staff, which kind of perplexes them. And when I talk to them about Saharanpur and no cell phones and a hole in the floor with a bar of Lux soap, they look at me as if I'm just kind of come from Mars. They just don't understand this world because many of them are just grown up with very different environments. I got an email just last week from one of our staff members who was representing the University of Essex, and he came on board and joined one of our ICRs and ran the university, and he's just been promoted to run their international office in Essex. And I hadn't heard from him for 10 years or so. And he wrote to me and said, Adrian, I just wanted to thank you because the skills that you brought to the organization, the things that I learned from, the way that I saw you operate, have enabled me to get with my family to living in London, running the international university off. This is a dream come true for me, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. That makes a lot of the hard work really, really great. Now he went off, he joined a competitor for a while. I didn't hear from him for years, but to know that you've made that impact, that's rewarding. That actually, a bit like the Amish Tripathi story last night, that's worth more than one of my sales team. Don't tell them this because it's end of financial year, but it's more than the sales team saying to me, we've just won another 50 lakh project, but to hear something like that from Sandeep is as more rewarding than a kind of financial deal that we close. So that's a good example. And you very rarely, as the CEO or founder of a company, get thanked for anything. Very rarely. No one ever says you're doing a good job internally. It's only in forums like this where Ankur and Bhakti are exceptionally kind and gracious, and it's why I'm enjoying this conversation so much. But at work, my 360 reviews, you'd think I was just a beginner in the company trying to figure life out. So all the hearts, keep them coming, because it's hard and a lonely place running an organization like this. And so when you get a message like that from an employee who left you 10 years ago, that gives you the energy to keep pushing on and keep doing the right thing by your staff. And we consistently try to do that. We are a family at Sannam S4. It's become a bigger family and a bigger family, and it's harder to keep the culture. It's harder to keep the togetherness. It's harder to kind of just have that common bond. But we keep persevering at trying to do that every day. And And so that's an example I'd share with you, Meenakshi. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Adrian, and good luck for becoming one of the biggest education families in India. Thank you. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Thank you, Adrian. So we have come to the fag end of our conversation, and unfortunately, we have to close in the next 4 minutes. And I have still a couple of questions waiting, which I'm not going to take up if people are not around. I mean, I have a question from Puneet. Puneet, if you want to raise it, you can. And Charat from St. George University, are you around?
Yeah, hi, good evening. Ankur, Puneet here.
Yeah, Puneet, make it brief, really brief and fast.
Yes. I think I'll take some time to at least appreciate the whole conversation that has happened. This is a really good platform. And thank you so much, Adrian. This was a great learning. It's always good to learn from people who are at level of yours, interacting. And so nice to hear that you see India as a good opportunity and you being here and experiencing this and spreading this across the globe. Amazing. I just want to ask one question on how do you think with the technology getting stronger and artificial intelligence taking, the next stage now, will this change your outreach approach to the college and college to students and school to colleges? Do you think that will change something, the job of outreach, is it at stake?
Perfect.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it like any sector will evolve. Every sector is evolved. I remember having a long conversation in Iowa with Chandra Babu Naidu around healthcare technology, and he'd said to me his minister for health was telling him don't implement all of this technology because it's going to put people out of work. And he said, how crazy is that we're delivering something that's going to improve the health, but on the other hand we're worried about losing jobs?
Yeah.
The contradiction. So look, I think it's important that we all stay very much in tune with technology adoption. Every single one of us on this call now has a cell phone and use it very, very actively. So we can use technology, we can use Paytm, we can wander around the country without a credit card in our pocket these days. I think it's going to evolve. It has to evolve, and our collective responsibility is to use technology in a responsible way, so that students get the right kind of information. So where technology can improve scale, and as the work I'm doing with the Prime Minister's office, access and openness, information sharing is much more efficient on through technology, but genuine counselling, having that conversation with the student and the parent, I think there's an enormous role. What technology should do is challenge all of us to step up and be better counsellors and make sure that as human beings we're keeping ahead of that bot.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Adrian.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Adrian. I think that's about the time we had for sharing personal side of you, sharing your expertise, knowledge, experience about everything from under the sun, Saharanpur, the 92 mangoes and train, and then talking about the world, globalized view about India and what we can do as a country to, move faster and move in the right direction. Unfortunately, Bhakti is facing some internet issues. She is not here right now, so my apologies on her behalf. But thank you so much, Adrian. It was a pleasure hosting you, and I think I speak on behalf of the entire the Outreach Collective that we had a fantastic 1 hour 15 minutes spent with you. All the very best for what you are doing next. I'm sure it's pretty exciting. And we hope to see you sometime in India soon. I think you are a world traveler. I mean, I keep seeing you in different time zones, but I'm sure you visit India quite often. And if you're next time here, I think some of us would love to meet you also in person in Delhi or Bombay or wherever. I mean, your schedule permits us to do that. So thank you, Adrian, and wish you a very, very good evening or afternoon wherever you are.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a pleasure to be part of the Outreach Collective, and really delighted to see so many people here, and I have some great questions. And we've all got so much work ahead of us. Keep going. We'll have good days and bad days, but as a collective, I think there's an enormous amount of positive impact we can make on India. So appreciate the opportunity to join you today, Anka. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to know that you know Hindi also. So namaskar.
Namaskar ji. Okay, take care everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.